Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different, and I'm going to be making a Star Wars tier list. So the list is going to be pretty much just all of the Star Wars content and my ranking of them. Now there are a couple things that won't be on the list because either I haven't seen them or I don't remember them very well. And those things are the Clone Wars movie, which I just do not remember at all, the Bad Batch, and Resistance, which is the Star Wars cartoon. So those are the main things that won't be on the list. There's other things that I'm sure you could think of, like a bunch of the old stuff from the 80s will not be on here, droids, Ewoks, that kind of thing. But of the main line of content, really, the Clone Wars movie and Bad Batch are the big missing pieces. But anyways, let's just get straight in. Okay, before we get straight into the ranking, let me just explain. I'm sure you all know how tier lists work, but it's kind of like a grading scale, but with an S, and the S is the best. And don't ask why, because I don't know. I never really got it. Alright, so let's get straight in, starting with this bottom tier, actually. And we're going to start with The Last Jedi. I'm also just doing the letters of the name. That way I don't run out of space. So I need another marker. So, The Last Jedi. I mean, what's there to say about this movie that hasn't already been said? How about that it's good? Very few people say that. But The Last Jedi is, for my money, the worst piece of Star Wars content. And personally, I think it's the most unsatisfying thing in the series, because you've got crotchety old man Luke for no reason, and you've got a version of Luke that doesn't care about anything or anyone, and it's really off-putting if you're a fan of the series that that the character is completely different, and there's just a lot of things in the movie that just don't really work. So to me, that is the worst piece of Star Wars content. Coming up next, this one is probably a bit more controversial. That's a K. You know what that K is for? Kenobi. Kenobi failed in so many unbelievable ways. It was just a hard show to watch. For whatever reason, the main character throughout the show shifted away from being Obi-Wan and became the Inquisitor girl, Reva, who nobody likes. Like, I'm sure there are some people that like her, but as a character, she is just boring. And her origin, surviving Order 66, does not make sense. I think that the editing and direction in Kenobi is also super sloppy. And oh my god, don't even get me started on Kenobi essentially making lightsabers just a glow stick. There's a scene in the show where a lightsaber literally bounces off of a stormtrooper's armor. They do not do that. They cut clean through stuff like that. And, people are also just miraculously able to survive lightsaber wounds. But yeah, the one area where I do give the show credit is it does get Darth Vader very well until, again, the end of the show. And, okay, the lightsaber fights in this show were awful, all of them. The only one that was even moderately enjoyable to watch was Darth Vader versus the Inquisitor, and that was only mildly entertaining because the Inquisitor lost, which is exactly what we wanted to happen. So to me, Kenobi ranks right down there with The Last Jedi. Alright, next, we're gonna say, actually, The Rise of Skywalker. So, it's hard. This is a movie that I really liked the first time I watched it. And then I thought about it. And then I'm like, man, this movie just does not make sense. There's so much happening. Palpatine's back for no good reason. And yeah, the movie's just a really hard one to accept as a Star Wars fan. Kind of like The Last Jedi. It also doesn't help that it's completely different from The Last Jedi. Everything is different. And most of the movie feels like damage control from The Last Jedi, plus a little bit of the new content that was supposed to be for the third movie of the trilogy. It was just kind of a hard movie experience watching The Rise of Skywalker because it was the end of Star Wars and I really wanted to like it, but I just couldn't. Alright, so let's see. Next, we're actually going to move up to the D tier. And we're going to start off by putting in Attack of the Clones. And to me, this is the worst movie of the prequels, far and away. I cannot stand Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. And and the only person who I think is worse in the Star Wars movies is Natalie Portman as Padme. They do not deliver good performances, and it's frustrating. And it hurts to watch the scenes where they interact. And that's what most of this movie is. I also did not like the lightsaber fight at the end of the movie with Count Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin and Yoda. The coolest part is when Yoda takes over. But other than that, the fight's really ho-hum. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on Attack of the Clones. Overall, it's not good. Yeah, which is why it's in D tier. It's not good, but it's also not the worst. Alright, so that's Attack of the Clones done. Next up has to be the Book of Boba Fett. So, the Book of Boba Fett was hard. I liked watching it week over week when it was releasing on Disney Plus. But I just thought, it would be nice if something actually happened in the show. It would be nice if Boba Fett was useful in the show. And honestly, the 2 episodes with The Mandalorian really saved this show for me. That's why it ranks up here instead of down here. But yeah, Book of Boba Fett, okay, I guess. It doesn't make me angry like these 3 especially do. So that's kind of all I have to say on Book of Boba Fett, honestly. Yeah, let's see. Does anything else go in this D category? You know what? We're going to put Solo down here. Because Solo's not terrible. But it's also not good. It's just kind of hard to watch. It's rare that you buy the actor who's playing young Han Solo as Han Solo, which kind of makes the movie hard to watch. The opening scene of the movie doesn't help either, but once the story gets going, it gets going. But it takes a while to get going. So overall, I'd say it's decent, not good, not bad. So yeah, that's Solo, and honestly, yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave the D tier. So it's Solo, Book of Boba Fett, and Attack of the Clones. So moving on to C tier, we're gonna throw in The Force Awakens. Oh, that's supposed to be an A. The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, you may have your issues with it, but people my age love it. It is the first Star Wars movie that they ever saw in theater, and it will always have a special place in the hearts of young people because of that. Kind of like Phantom Menace to older generations. So to me, that Force Awakens goes solidly in C tier because the story, it was A New Hope again. That's not bad. A New Hope's great. But when you wanted something new and you didn't get it, it was hard. So yeah, The Force Awakens, definitely C tier. Okay, now we're going to go to, actually, the 2D Clone Wars. 2D Clone Wars, if I hadn't rewatched it 2 weeks ago, would probably be A tier. I loved this show when I was a kid. But now I watch it and I'm like, man, this is really good. This is a lot of action. But like, what's actually happening though? And it doesn't need to be, there doesn't need to be much story for these episodes. But when you get into the second volume and there is more story, it's really nice. The animation's beautiful. It's just a really cool show. But because of the story problems, I can't really justify putting it above C tier. Alright, next up we're gonna go Rogue One, actually. Rogue One. Rogue One is saved by the final battle. That is the good part of the movie. And notice I didn't say one of the good parts. It is the only good part of the movie. All of the rest is really boring. It's about characters that you don't like. And overall, it's just really hard to get into Rogue One. Like, watching it from beginning to end, it's tough. But the end is amazing, which is why, for me, it gets C tier. So that, you know, thinking about this, you know, like school, 70%, that's not bad. Alright, so that takes care of Rogue One. That takes care of all the new movies, actually. Let's see, what next? Alright, starting into B tier, we're gonna put Revenge of the Sith. Because Revenge of the Sith is good for the first like 20-30 minutes. Then it gets really, really slow and bad and hard to watch. And then it picks up again. And it doesn't really stop once it picks up again. But that 30 minutes of downtime in the middle is what puts it into B tier for me. That's not bad, but it's also not perfect. And ranking just above Revenge of the Sith is The Mandalorian, M. Mandalorian's really good. And especially with when it came out, when, you know, us as Star Wars fans were questioning, is there ever going to be a good piece of Star Wars content again? It was a really, really nice change because it just kind of went back to basics for Star Wars. They were like, what if we set like a Western style story in space? And it really worked super well. And I know that people have their issues with The Mandalorian, but I personally just love it. So yeah, that's The Mandalorian. Next up is 3D Clone Wars. 3D Clone Wars, really good half the time. The other half, it's pretty average. It's very ho-hum Star Wars action for half the show. But when it's good, man, it's really good. I think of the end of season 7 or season 5 or 4, half the arcs in season 3 were really good. And there were a lot of good standalone episodes too. It's really good when it's good, but it's just not quite consistent enough to move up to A tier. But you know what does make A tier easy? The Phantom Menace. I think The Phantom Menace is the best of the prequels because it doesn't rely on these super clunky actors and actresses to get the story home. You get Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn is awesome. Ray Parks as Darth Maul, awesome. And Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's awesome. And man, tell you what, the lightsaber fight at the end of that movie is incredible. It's so good. And finally seeing Obi-Wan, win. Which, by the way, we hadn't seen him win until Phantom Menace. But yeah, that's a killer movie right there. And I just think that it gets a really good sense of Star Wars fun across. And yes, you can people complain about the political tabloid issues in Phantom Menace, but I would take the political issues over the social drama issues that plagued Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones. And by social drama issues, I mean relationship drama. And yeah, so Phantom Menace for me is the first of A tier. And then the last of A tier is Rebels. Rebels is the most criminally underrated piece of Star Wars content. I've been watching it again for a second time these past couple months, and man, it is really good. I would say probably one of my favorite bits is the season 2 finale, and that everything just fits together so perfectly, especially in that finale. And then seasons 3 and 4 are also really, really good. Seasons 1 and 2 are mostly, you're meeting the crew, you're meeting the new cast of characters, but the villains are what sell the show in seasons 1 and 2. The Inquisitors are all really intimidating, especially the Grand Inquisitor on Rebels, which is another problem I had with Kenobi. Kenobi the Grand Inquisitor sucks. On Rebels, he was awesome. And yeah. So Rebels is really good. It gets the Star Wars universe across super well. And it also, it satisfies the original trilogy fans and the Clone Wars fans, because Rebels is a continuation of Clone Wars, and Mandalorian is a continuation of both of them. So they kind of fit together as a trilogy of their own, and is a really good set. But yeah, so that's kind of all I have to say on Rebels. And then, let's see. In A tier, I'm also actually going to have to put A New Hope. I love A New Hope, especially the trench run. To me, that's the standout scene from the movie. It loses out on this S perfect ranking for me, mostly because it's not as good as its sequels. That's not to say it's bad, it's still easily the third best, but the sequels do everything better. Alright, so yeah, that's A New Hope, and now we get to Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, Empire Strikes Back gets second on my list. And again, it's nothing against Empire Strikes Back that makes it have second. I think Empire Strikes Back is a perfect movie. It's so good. Yes, the Millennium Falcon flying with the Star Destroyers and in the asteroid field. Such a good scene. It's so cool watching it happen. Luke fighting Darth Vader for the first time is an amazing fight, and it's cool to see, Darth Vader have to start having to try, but Luke also not having a chance against Darth Vader in that fight. And yeah, and another thing about the movie, when you watch it that you might not realize, the good guys do not win at all. Like, the closest they get to winning is running away. They do not win the Battle of Hoth. Luke doesn't beat Vader on Bespin. The Empire still tracks Han and the Millennium Falcon to Bespin, and in general, all they do is get away, and that's the best they do against the Empire. And it really does a good job showing the Empire as a credible threat, which is something that all of the movies that followed could not do. The Separatists in the prequels never felt like a threat. And same with the First Order in the sequels. You never cared about anything that they did. But in Empire Strikes Back, we see the rebels can lose and lose bad. And that's what we needed, and that's kind of what you needed to see out of the sequel. So that the triumphant victory in, hear me out here, number 1, Return of the Jedi, would feel deserved. So, Return of the Jedi, I could go into details about why it's my favorite, but I've actually already done that in a separate video, which you can check out in the description down below. But Return of the Jedi just, it hits all the right notes and it wraps up the Star Wars story in a super satisfying way. And really, they should have let this be the end. At least the end for Han and Leia. Because after this, Han has fulfilled his character arc, going from smuggler, pirate, extraordinaire, shooting first and killing people without remorse, to a hero. And that is Han's character arc. And then they abandoned it for the sequels, and that was frustrating. And Leia went from being the diplomat to the leader, and again, they almost stuck with it for the sequels, but they abandoned the diplomat part of her. But yeah, that's why I don't think Star Wars content should have Han or Leia in it anymore, because their stories are done. But the reason that works to have Luke in things like, The Mandalorian and the other one, Book of Boba Fett, is because he ends his story arc by becoming the first of the new Jedi. So naturally you want to see him build the rest of the Jedi Order. But that's kind of just my general Star Wars opinion. So I'm going to just break down the list by numbers. So we've got the best is Return of the Jedi, then Empire Strikes Back, then A New Hope, then Rebels, Phantom Menace, the 3D Clone Wars show, Mandalorian, Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, the 2D Clone Wars, The Force Awakens, Solo, The Book of Boba Fett, Attack of the Clones, Rise of Skywalker, Kenobi, and then in dead last, The Last Jedi. So that's my opinions on Star Wars. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to know. Especially about Kenobi, because Kenobi is the one that's controversial. Because I know that some people really like it, and me personally, I just don't understand it. But that's all I've got for you today. So I'm just another guy named James, and I'll see you all next time.